Hey everybody, great to be learning with you today as we continue our studies of the 6th chapter of Masechet Brachot and begin to explore whether one bracha can be used to cover multiple different foods. In today's lesson, we'll have a chance to explore two things. The first goal we have is to recall those various Brachot Rishona that we've studied in the first few mishnayot in this chapter, and then to rank order them from most specific to least specific, from most important to least important, to get a better understanding of the relative significance of each bracha in the grand scheme of brachot. And once we do that, we'll look at a second goal, which is to learn 3 different conditions under which one bracha can be used to extend to multiple different foods, so that if you have many foods in front of you, you might be able to make just one bracha and have the mitzvah obligation for all of the foods covered. So let's look back at the various different Brachot Rishona that we've had a chance to study recently. We know that for fruits that grow on trees, the bracha Rishona is ha'etz, and for vegetables it is ha'adama. That's covered in the first Mishnah. Anything that's grain-based, like cookies or cakes or cereals, receive the bracha of mizonot, and anything that doesn't grow from the ground, fish, meat, cheeses, other dairy products, candies, drinks, those receive the bracha of shahakol. Now, generally speaking, one food item, like an apple, could be used to cover another food item, like an orange, under certain circumstances. And that's what I'd like to look at with you today. What are the circumstances under which one bracha for one food could extend to all these different foods? If you look at the fruits in front of you on the screen, would a bracha on an apple simultaneously cover the bracha obligation on an orange, grapes, and dates? Or are there other considerations that we have to think about when deciding whether or not this rule would apply? So the first rule when it comes to extending one bracha to many foods is whether or not the other foods have the same bracha rishona. You see, in the case of an apple and an orange, both have the bracha of ha'etz, and so you could extend the bracha on the apple to the orange. This, of course, wouldn't apply if the second item did not have the same bracha rishona. So in the case of an orange, which has the bracha rishona of ha'etz, I couldn't extend that bracha to the food item of a potato, which has a totally different bracha rishona of ha'adama. The second rule we need to consider here, after confirming that both food items have the same bracha rishona, is if they're the same type of item. And what I mean by that is the following. Let's say you had 2 items that were shahakol, one a solid and one a liquid. Even though they both have the same bracha rishona, like in the case of the salmon and the glass of water, you couldn't use the bracha on the salmon, shahakol, to cover the bracha of the water, which is also shahakol, because one is a liquid and one is a solid. This rule of extending one bracha to multiple foods only applies when both items are of the same type, both solid or both liquid. And after we've confirmed that both items have the same bracha rishona, and they are both the same state of food, so both solid or both liquid, the last thing we need to look at is whether or not the second item is of an equal or lower rank than the first item. In other words, the first item that you're making the bracha on must be of a higher rank than the second item. What do I mean by ranking brachot? Well, let's take a look at how halacha configures all of the different brachot rishona in terms of their importance. So at the top of the list here is hamotzi, and at the bottom is shahakol. And pretty much what halacha does is rank order these brachot from most important to least important based on how specific the bracha itself is. The bracha of hamotzi, for example, is a highly specific bracha. It can only be used to cover bread. Mizonot is also fairly specific. It can only be used to cover grain-based items. Same with hagafen. It could only be used to cover things that come from grape products like wine or grape juice. But once you get below hagafen, to the level of ha'etz and ha'adama, and even shahakol, you're talking about multiple food items that qualify under the category that we're discussing. So the bracha of ha'etz could be used for multiple different fruits. The bracha of ha'adama is even more expansive, could be used for multiple different vegetables. And of course, shahakol covers the most amount of food items because shahakol can be used for anything that doesn't grow from the ground, which pretty much covers everything else that's not mentioned above it. And so when we look at the order of brachot, we have to first decide if the item that we're looking at has a higher rank than the one below it. Take an example of grapes and an apple. So both have the bracha rishona of ha'etz, but the grapes are of a higher rank than the apple. They're both ha'etz, but the grapes are higher, and here's why. You see, once we look at specific in terms of the different types of brachot, we then look at other factors to decide which food item has a higher rank. So if both items are equally specific, so in the case of the apple and the grapes, they're both ha'etz, so that won't help us. We look at the next level, which is, does one of them come from the shivat haminim? In the case of the grapes, they do. In the case of the apple, it does not. So the bracha on grapes could work for an apple because grapes are of a higher rank than an apple. But the opposite is not true. The bracha on an apple would not cover the grapes because even though they're both the same rank in terms of bracha, the apple is a lower ranked item than the grapes because the apple is not from shivat haminim and the grapes are. Something that is of a lower rank cannot jump up and cover something that is of a higher rank. It can go from top down, so a high rank item can cover an item that's beneath it, but a low rank item cannot jump up to one above it. We'll look at the other two situations, whole versus slice and your preferred type of food, when we get back together in class. But these are some of the considerations that we have to look at when deciding whether or not one bracha can be expanded to multiple food items. Do they have the same bracha rishona? Are they the same state of food, solid or both liquid? And is the first item of a higher rank? If the first item is of a higher rank and the other items are of a lower rank, then you can extend one bracha to many different types of foods. The details we're going to fill in when we learn together in class. Looking forward to going deeper and expanding some of this information with you when we return.